There's something we don't talk about enough when we celebrate intelligence, introspection, and deep thinking. We love to quote Jung, Nietzsche, or Dostoevsky on social media. We romanticize the tortured artist, the philosophical loner, the wise man staring into the void. But we rarely ask, what is the cost of that depth? What happens when you don't just think deeply, but when you can't stop thinking deeply? When you don't just understand the world, but feel the weight of all its contradictions in your bones? That's what this video is about. The dark side of deep thinkers. The side that nobody likes to talk about. And yes, Carl Jung saw it coming. Jung once wrote, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." That may sound poetic, but it's terrifying once you realize what it means. The deeper we go into truth, the more we encounter darkness. Not just the darkness outside us, corruption, suffering, chaos, but the darkness within. The parts of ourselves we'd rather not see. The shadow. And for deep thinkers, that shadow isn't somewhere in the background, it's what we wrestle with every day. We don't just analyze problems, we internalize them. We don't just ask philosophical questions, we live them. And that's where the danger begins.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
You see, thinking deeply isn't just about insight. It's about confrontation. And not everyone survives that confrontation. Some people escape into overthinking, others into despair, and some into isolation so deep that they forget what sunlight feels like. If you've ever been in that place, you know what I mean. You start to question everything, not just your beliefs, but your own identity. You peel off the layers: society, religion, ego, expectation, until there's nothing left but a trembling question mark. Who am I, really? What is this all for? Why am I even here? These aren't casual questions. They're spiritual earthquakes, and if you don't have a solid foundation beneath your feet, they can swallow you whole. Carl Jung knew this intimately. He didn't just study the unconscious, he descended into it. He called it his confrontation with the unconscious, a psychological breakdown that nearly destroyed him. He wrote about voices, visions, dreams so vivid they blurred the boundary between waking and sleep. But instead of running from them, he documented them. He turned his breakdown into a breakthrough. That's where his most profound insights came from, not from comfort, but from chaos. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most deep thinkers are walking that tightrope every day. We're trying to balance between clarity and madness, between vision and delusion, between wisdom and despair. And sometimes we fall. So I ask you now, how deep is too deep? Have you ever felt like your own thoughts were turning against you? Like your intelligence was both a gift and a curse? Like you could see through the world, but the more you saw, the less you belonged to it? If so, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're not doomed. You're just standing at the edge of something most people never dare to touch. And in the next part, we're going to walk even closer to that edge. We're going to explore the shadow, the mirror that deep thinkers can't escape. The part of ourselves that holds both our greatest power and our greatest threat. Carl Jung once said, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." And this is where the descent truly begins. Because once you start thinking deeply, not just about the world, but about yourself, you begin to uncover uncomfortable truths. You find the parts of you that you've denied, rejected, suppressed, but the anger you never expressed, the envy you never admitted, the chaos you never dared to explore. And here's the paradox: the deeper you understand others, the harder it becomes to ignore your own contradictions. You start to see that the world's darkness is not separate from you, it's mirrored within you. This is the part of the deep thinker's journey that nobody puts on Instagram. Nobody writes quotes about the nights you lie awake, wondering why your insights don't bring peace. Why the more you learn, the less you feel understood. Why the more you see, the less you can unsee. You begin to realize that knowledge doesn't always comfort, it often isolates. And that wisdom isn't always uplifting, it can be heavy, even devastating. Because to see deeply is to mourn the illusions you've outgrown, to grieve the simplicity you can never return to feel the weight of humanity's brokenness not as an abstract idea, but as a wound in your own psyche. But this isn't just about feeling sad or alienated. It's about the moral weight of awareness. Once you see the shadow, yours and the world's, you can't pretend it's not there. You can't unknow injustice. You can't unsee hypocrisy. You can't go back to being comfortably numb. And that's where the burden begins, because deep thinking creates responsibility. A responsibility to act, to speak, to live differently. But often we don't know how. We're overwhelmed. We become paralyzed by the complexity of the questions we've uncovered. How do you live authentically in a world built on performance? How do you speak truth when most people don't want to hear it? How do you love humanity when you see how deeply it suffers? This is the existential weight Jung carried, and what he tried to offer us wasn't just analysis, but integration. He didn't say, avoid the shadow. He said, own it. He believed that the goal of deep thinking isn't to rise above the darkness, but to integrate it to become whole. That's what makes his psychology so radically different. Jung didn't want saints. He wanted integrated souls, people who had confronted their demons and learned to walk beside them, people who didn't pretend to be pure, but who had made peace with their contradictions. Because only then can wisdom become compassionate. Only then does insight become healing. So here's a question that cuts to the core. Are you thinking deeply to escape yourself or to meet yourself? Because there's a difference. Some of us dive into philosophy, psychology, or spirituality not to grow, but to hide. We build intellectual fortresses to protect ourselves from pain. We analyze instead of feel. We dissect instead of love. But deep thinking without emotional courage becomes a trap. It turns clarity into coldness. It turns insight into isolation. And that's the real danger of being a thinker when your ideas become armor. When you're so busy understanding everything that you forget to be anything. But it doesn't have to end there. The dark side of deep thinking is not a curse, it's a threshold, a rite of passage. If you're willing to go through it, not around it, you come out the other side with something rare, inner authority, not borrowed beliefs, not clever arguments, but the quiet confidence of a person who has faced their own complexity and survived. That is what Carl Jung modeled. That is what every deep thinker must eventually confront. And in the final part of this journey, we're going to explore how to cross that threshold, how to turn depth into direction, pain into purpose, and thought into transformation. So now we arrive at the question that haunts every deep thinker: what do I do with all this awareness? Because insight without direction can become a prison. You can drown in your own understanding. You can become so aware of every contradiction, complexity, and nuance that you stop taking action altogether. And yet, that's not what thinking was meant for. That's not what philosophy was meant for. Jung didn't descend into the unconscious to get lost. He went there to integrate, to bring back the gold hidden in the darkness. That's the true purpose of deep thought, not to escape life, but to return to it transformed. And here's where most people get stuck. They think that once they've reached a certain level of awareness, they're supposed to have all the answers. But Jung would say the opposite. The goal isn't to find answers, it's to hold the tension of opposites, and to live with paradox, to accept that the world is both beautiful and brutal, that you are both capable of profound love and deep destruction. The mature thinker doesn't collapse into despair. When they see this, they hold it. They carry it, like a bridge between what is and what could be. That's the philosopher's burden. Not to escape suffering, but to illuminate it. Not to flee the human condition, but to embrace it with eyes wide open. But how do we do this in practical terms? It starts with integration. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. So instead of avoiding, we must confront. We must bring the unconscious into the light. That means journaling your shadow thoughts without judgment. That means reflecting on your emotional reactions as signals, not flaws. That means noticing the parts of yourself you criticize in others. It's slow work, humbling work, but it's the only work that leads to wholeness. Because the goal is not to become perfect, it's to become real. And real people aren't flawless. They're integrated. Next, we must learn to act from that integration. That means creating, not just consuming, expressing, not just analyzing. Deep thinkers are often tempted to stay in their heads, but the real magic happens when you bring your thoughts into form. Write the book, start the podcast, paint the strange image that keeps showing up in your dreams, talk to someone about the ideas that scare you. Because action is the crucible where ideas become transformation. Jung didn't just theorize, he created the Red Book. He drew, painted, wrote. He gave form to the formless, and in doing so, he healed himself. You can too. And perhaps most importantly, we must reclaim connection. Deep thinking can isolate us, but only if we let it. The truth is, your depth is not a burden to others, it's a gift. If you've seen into the abyss, you can guide others through it. Not by giving them answers, but by walking beside them, by holding space, by listening with the kind of silence that only someone who has suffered can offer. We need more thinkers who also know how to feel, more philosophers who can also love. Because what good is all our wisdom if it doesn't make us more human? So I leave you with this: don't be afraid of your depth. Don't apologize for your complexity. Don't hide the shadow that lives inside your insight. But also don't worship it. Don't let it become your identity. You are not your thoughts. You are not your despair. You are not your symbols, systems, or theories. You are the one who is aware of them, and that awareness is the most powerful force in the universe. Use it, not to escape the world, but to return to it, wiser, humbler, and more alive than ever before. Thank you for walking this path with me. If this resonated with you, don't just keep thinking, start becoming. Reflect, create, integrate, share, Because in a world that celebrates noise, your depth is sacred. And it's time we stop hiding it.